processes. An architecture, de humeurs, is based on the potential which contemporary sciences offer to reread the human corporalities via their physiology and their chemical balance. This assumption of an architecture, de humeurs, attempts to make palpable and prehensible, through technologies, the emotional transactions of the body animal, the body headless, the chemistry of the body, so that this one informs us of his adaptation, its sympathy, of its empathy, confronted to a situation, to an environment. Apparatuses for the architectural assemblages on transactional and structuring protocols. One aspect is the collection of data regarding the chemical body, based on the neurobiological emissions of each future owner. Until now, the collection of information involved in the protocol of the residential unit has been exclusively based on visible and reductive data, surface area, number of rooms, access mode, and party walls. Instead, this experiment presents the opportunity to interrogate an obscure area that could be called the emission of desires through the capture of physiological signals based on neurobiological secretions, and to implement a chemistry of the humeurs of future purchasers, taken as inputs, generating a diversity of habitable morphologies and the relationships between them. The groundwork for this architecture of humeurs is a rereading of the contradictions inherent in the expression of these desires, both those that traverse public space through the ability to express a choice by means of language on the surface of things, and those that are underlying and perhaps more disturbing but just as valid. By means of the latter, we can consider the body as a desiring machine with its own chemistry: dopamine, hydrocortisone, melatonin, adrenaline, and other molecules secreted by the body itself that are imperceptibly anterior to the consciousness these substances generate. Thus, the making of architecture is inflected by another reality, another complexity, that of the acephalous body, the animal body. The other aspect is comprised by computational, mathematical and machinist procedures designed to produce an urban structure following certain protocols of improbable and uncertain successive indeterminations, aggregations and layouts to rearticulate the link between the individual and the collective. The layout of the residential units and the structural trajectories are conceived and developed here as posterior to the morphologies that support social life and not as an a priori. These structures are calculated following simultaneously incremental and recursive structural optimization protocols whose principal result is the concurrently generated physicality and morphology of an architecture. The algorithm, developed by François Jouve, differs from directly calculated structural methods such as calculating a load-bearing structure of a building after it is designed. In contrast, the algorithm is based on, among other things, two mathematical strategies. The algorithm allows the architectural form to emerge from the trajectories of the transmission of forces simultaneously with the calculation that generates them. One taken from the derivative initiated by the research of Hadamard, and the other from the protocol of the representation of complex shapes by Cartesian meshing through level set. The mathematical process of empirical optimization makes it possible for the architectural design to react and adapt to previously established constraints instead of the opposite. An architecture of humeurs means breaking into language's mechanism of dissimulation in order to physically construct malentendus. A station for collecting these signals is offered. It makes it possible to perceive these chemical variations and capture the changes in emotional states so that they affect the geometries emitted and influence the construction protocol. The research is organized on several levels, from the physiology of humeurs to malentendus, les malentendus, mishearing, from the misunderstanding of humeurs to physiomorphological computation, from physiomorphological computation to the multitude mathematical operators for structural optimization. The algorithms From the algorithms to bio-knit physicality, tooling, robotic process, tooling, bio-cement weaving, material expertise, animist, vitalist and machinist, the architecture of humeurs re-articulates the need to confront the unknown in a contradictory manner by means of computational and mathematical assessments. The architecture of humeurs is also a tool that will give rise to multitudes and their palpitation and heterogeneity, the premises of a relational organization protocol. Several levels. From the physiology of humeurs to misunderstandings, the humeurs collection is organized on the basis of interviews that make visible the conflict and even schizophrenia of desires between those secreted, biochemical and neurobiological, and those expressed through the interface of language, free will. Mathematical tools taken from set theory, belonging, inclusion, etc., as a negotiation of distances between the human beings who are to constitute these collective aggregates. Misunderstandings. This means taking conflicts into account as an operational mode, allowing architecture to become their transactional vector. Claustrophobia, philia, agoraphobia, philia, xenophobia, philia, acrophobia, philia, noctophobia, philia, sociophobia, philia, neophobia, philia. Claustrophobia, philia, agoraphobia, philia, xenophobia, philia, acrophobia, philia, noctophobia, philia, sociophobia, philia, neophobia, philia. From the misunderstanding of humeurs to physiomorphological computation. The volume of an entity unit is 12 by 12 by 12 meters. This is the basis on which our calculations and hypotheses have been made. From physiomorphological computation to the multitude. A multitude of aggregations of physiomorphological layouts is organized according to parameters of chronological positioning and variable distances between the entities, collective, tribal, human clusters, or conversely singleton units. This includes public layouts and microplaces. Mathematical operators for structural optimization as indicated above. These are mathematical processes whose purpose is to achieve an incremental and recursive optimization, ex-local, local and hyper-local, that simultaneously calculates and designs support structures for the physiomorphologies. Forms are fabricated only by successive iterations that link, by physically and structurally coagulating, the interstices between morphologies so that they support each other. The calculations satisfy precise inputs, constraints and characteristics of the materials used, initial conditions, dead load and transfer of forces, intensity and vectorization of these forces, etc. The algorithms. Basically, this is the name of a physiomorphological residence unit. But more precisely, it's a name that characterizes a structural aesthetics thought as a geometry resulting posterior to the morphological fabrication of residential areas. The point is to emancipate architecture from the conceptual logic that takes structuration as the starting point, and instead allow the emergence of a physical matrix that can react to the multiplicity of morphologies and the ambiguity of the desires of future purchasers. Thus, this open-source mechanism can replace the determinist and predictable topology of collective habitats. From the algorithms to bio-knit physicality. Development of a construction protocol that can deal with complex, non-standard geometries through a process of secretion, extrusion and agglutination. This frees the construction procedure from the usual frameworks that are incompatible with a geometry constituted by a series of anomalies and singularities. Toolings, robotic process. The development of a secretion and weaving machine that can generate a vertical structure by means of extrusion and sintering, full-size 3D printing, using a hybrid raw material, a bioplastic cement, that chemically agglomerates to physically constitute the computational trajectories. This structural calligraphy works like a machinist's stereotomy, comprised of successive geometrics according to a strategy based on a repetitive protocol. This machine is both additive and formative. It is called bio-politic. Tooling, bio-cement weaving, material expertise, development of a viscous and adherent secretable materials so as to produce this morphologically complex structure, a material and procedures similar to the contour crafting developed with the Baroque Koshnevis lab at USC for the I've Heard About project. This is a bio-cement component, a mix of cement and bio-resin developed by the agricultural polymers industry that makes it possible to control the parameters of viscosity, liquidity and polymerization and thus produce chemical and physical agglutination at the time of secretion. The mechanical expertise of this material is made visible, constraints of rupture induced by traction, compression and shearing, etc. Natural machine, mechanism, vitalism, animism. Nature is full of life. The difference between an artificial machine and a natural machine is like the difference between the finite and the infinite, the static and the dynamic, the fixed and the mobile, the finitely producible or reproducible and the infinitely reproducible. In an ambiguous passage in his Tips and Natra, Leibniz praises Boyle, English scientist of his day, for his attempt to reconcile Aristotle and Descartes, and especially for arguing that we should consider the mechanism of a body to be its very nature. This formulation demonstrates that nature and machine are inseparable no matter how far we descend into nature's depths. No matter how small a machine may be, there are always machines within machines and so on ad infinitum. An infinity of organic machines. No matter how far we venture in analyzing matter, there is an infinity of organic machines for us to perceive, even beyond or behind what we would call an inert body and what Leibniz called an aggregatum. A block of marble is like a lake full of fish in that both are made up of an agglomeration of living substances. In other words, behind the inert there is the living. The invisible relays the visible, and the micro the macro. Thus there is neither emptiness nor discontinuity in nature, because wherever we go, there will always be fullness and continuity. But this fullness and continuity are not left to chance or chaos. They are ordered or reorganized in ever smaller machines encased in one another, and when they are unencased again, so to speak, each brings to light beings one after another, each perfectly formed and organized, going from the invisible to the visible, from the transparent to the opaque and so on. This is what the theory of preformation called evolution or development. For Leibniz, the best interpretation of unity is union, integration, cohesion, and likewise order and organization. The structuring of matter in a rational form. That's what he called metaphysical unity, or a metaphysical point. The expression organic machine thus leads to the idea of a dignity particular to a body, one that comes from its own order. In other words, its participation in the infinite organization, the machine of machines, or the machine in each of its points. Leibniz emphasized that death or organic decomposition is nothing but the destruction of the coarse parts that a lifetime of development has added to the original structure. The divine machine conceived and realized in the best of all possible worlds. Mechanicalism and pan-vitalism. Far from opposing mechanicalism, Leibniz wrote to know that all bodily phenomena can be explained mechanically or by the corpuscular philosophy. His aim was simply to show the limits of a mechanicalism he believed incapable of producing forms from shapeless matter. It seemed that the weakness of mechanicalism consisted not in its inability to imitate, that is, to copy nature's works, but in its powerlessness to go beyond imitating their external and least essential aspects. This mechanicalism's theoretical error was that it believed that it had brought living beings and natural objects into the ambit of geometry. In this way, Leibniz held, it had failed to take account of what he called substances, in other words, the true unity of what is called the self in us. Quote, in other words, between the products of human art and those of nature there is the same distance that Leibniz habitually put between aggregatum, the ensemble or aggregate of unities, and substance, unity and organization. Leibniz rehabilitated vitalism for modern philosophy, not because he considered the world an animal but because it is full of life. In this sense it is as analogous to a block of marble as a herd of sheep, or a lake full of fish. This was his reaction against the predominant form of mechanicalism in his time, Cartesianism, which considered nature homogeneous and inert. In opposing the reduction of physical bodies to mere extension and a passive inertia, he affirmed their activity and dynamism and endowed them with action and power. Step by step, Leibniz populated the world with animated and living beings. What brought him to pan-vitalism was the conception that every segment of matter is inhabited by living and animated bodies, substances. He underscored this point, saying, "It is true that, according to my system, there is no portion of matter where there is not an infinity of organic and animated bodies. Consequently, substances, which are the most authentic expression of the principles of life, are everywhere and animate everything. They represent what is truly real in all things. The rest is nothing but their shadow and their relationships." The root and foundation of Leibniz's vitalism is the theory that everything is composed of substances. The things we call inert as well as those called living, animals, plants, etc. Everything that exists, is composed of substances. In turn, each substance is composed of a complex structure of form and matter. It is the infinite interplay of these little organic and living machines that constructs all the things of this world. This interplay produces the unity and diversity of nature, where everything is living and nothing is like anything else. Since it is in a constant state of becoming and therefore forms and reforms constantly,